This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I know you were probably expecting the voice of none other than Twitter's looms boldly, Peter Thomas Fornatel, but him, as well as Jonathan Kinchin, are currently trying to figure out a hotel situation in beautiful Los Angeles, California. So from here in the New York studios, producer Craig is going to do the open. So hopefully I do a pretty good job and you guys enjoy everything. Thanks so much for listening. I want to remind everybody, make sure you follow along on Twitter. It's the main source of information for the video, audio, media department here at Daily Racing Form. You can follow the specifically video content at DRF Video, and then, of course, at DRF Inside Post, as Pete and JK like to refer to it as the mothership Twitter account. You can follow Pete at Looms Boldly on Twitter, and Jonathan Kinchin at UT Big Hair. I wanted to come on and talk about a lot of great content that we're producing right now at Daily Racing Form, including a brand new series leading up to the Kentucky Oaks with Nicole Russo and Joe Nevels coming out every Tuesday. It's called the Kentucky Oaks Countdown. They'll be taking a look at a prime contender for the Kentucky Oaks each and every week leading up to that first weekend in May. Of course, Derby Watch is also back in progress with Mike Watchmaker and Jay Privman, two experts in the business, and taking a look at their top 20 list that they compile each and every week on drf.com. And of course, you can find that on Daily Racing Form. And both are incredibly good series, as this 3-year-old division is really starting to come into shape. And, we're getting a look at some of the early favorites, who some potential long shots are going to be. And there's always a couple of big names that pop up as we get later towards the Kentucky Derby that first weekend in May. Everybody, this is show 310, February 16th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. Again, not Pete, not JK. I'm Craig Orbanoff here. If you want to, I've been shout outed a couple times on the podcast. I even did the best of show with Pete, so hopefully you're a little familiar with my voice. But if not, if you want to check out my Twitter feed, every once in a while I'm talking about horse racing, but a lot of general sports on my account. You can find me at Seagorbs94. It's a big weekend of racing, a big Derby prep weekend of racing, with a lot of action going on at the Fairgrounds, as well as Laurel, Golden Gate, Santa Anita. It's a nice full card as the racing season really comes into fold. We have our Twitter feed open right now at DRF Video, and mine as well at Seagorbs94. So if you have any live questions you want to send my way, of course, you can do so. As Jonathan Kinchin joins the call here. Hopefully he is unmuted, but we're having a lot of fun as Jonathan Kinchin and Peter Thomas Fornatel check in to what I'm assuming is some kind of beautiful suite out in Los Angeles, John.
Hello and welcome.
Hello.
No, Pete and I are at the Langham Hotel. We're going over to Santa Anita today, and Pete's right next door in a phone booth. We're in phone booths in the Langham Hotel. I'm in one phone booth. He's in the one right next to me. So he's a little bit less tech savvy than me. So he's gonna slide in probably here in a second. But I think
I just saw the notification. So live from the phone booths in Los Angeles, we have none other than Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin. As great as my intro was, I think we're just gonna do it from the top here. Here is the beautiful new intro for the DRF Players Podcast.
This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome. I thought Pete was in. Maybe he's still working through it.
No, I don't know what's going on. I'm having a little internet outage here. Can you hear me now, JK?
You're good to go, my man. You were good to go. I can hear you. I can hear you in person, live and through the wall, and I can hear you on the headphones.
All right, so we're gonna just we'll restart quickly for those crazies who click on that link right away and are listening live. We'll just do like a quick restart now, and hopefully we can get through it. So all right, we'll pretend Willie Niles playing. I'm gonna leave like a 5-second break, and then producer Craig will be able to edit this seamlessly for the podcast. Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you. Slightly truncated version of the podcast. We got a little bit of a late start today. I am at the Langham Hotel. Those of you who saw me on Out of the Gate this week know that already. The Langham Hotel in beautiful Pasadena, California. Joined today not from the planet Texas, but in fact from the adjoining phone booth. And just wait, you'll see the visual evidence of this nonsense. From the next phone booth over, he's the people's champ, a 2-time semi-finalist in a pretty important handicapping contest they have out there in Las Vegas. He's Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's up? What's up? Yeah, no, I'm sitting in a chair that you would probably find in your grandmother's house, and I'm actually looking at a payphone, and it says, "Sorry, it's temporarily out of service," which I thought would have been assumed, but what does a payphone call even cost nowadays?
I don't. Can you even make one? Let me see if this one's working. Hang on. Let me check that. Dial tone. No dial tone here.
50 cents. 50 cents to make a call is what it says.
This is an antique, which is it's sort of weird. These are great little office nooks. I think they should officially convert them so you don't have degenerates like us pulling chairs across the lobby in a fancy old hotel. But it is what it is, and we are here, and we're going to be excited to handicap some races today. Also to answer a few listener questions, and maybe we can go over some general stuff. There's a question I've been wanting to talk to you about. We haven't really fully discussed it, Jonathan, privately even. So it'll be kind of, sometimes those are the best conversations on the podcast. I don't know if you've been following any of the Twitter chatter about policing contests. A lot of people have been popping up on my feed and talking about what can and can't be policed in terms of handicapping contests to prevent the type of collusion that we've had to. We don't have to discuss, we don't have to get into too many specifics here. We've certainly talked about some of this stuff at length, but I just sent out a tweet last night, and I was just curious to get your read on it. People keep saying things. People are talking to me about, if it's a judgment call as to what collusion is, you're going to have lawsuits and this stuff. And I just said, I think contests need, excuse me, let me start that again. I think contests need to take the attitude of a pit boss in a casino. Playing in them isn't a right, it's a privilege. What do you think of that notion generally?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, I've actually said the right and privilege statement. I said it on the NTRA Players Committee meetings we've had, and I also said it in the Breeders' Cup Wagering Committee. The great thing about our sport is that, and this nook of our sport, which is contests, is like you don't have to play in them. Like you are more than welcome to go downstairs and bet $10,000 on any horse that you want. You're more than welcome. Now, if you want to play in the contest because there's added value, if you want to play in the contest because it effectively can reduce your wager to there not being a takeout because of the prize money that's added to that situation, if you want to do that, that's great. But you got to fall into the rules that make sure that it remains a level and fair playing field for everyone. So I completely agree with you on the right and privilege thing. And with that being said, I do believe that something that resembles more of a pit boss. And what we mean by that, for those who haven't made it out to Vegas as much as PTF and I have, is that if a pit boss and or a casino in some way believes that you are cheating or somehow are gaining an edge on them that they don't like, then they just kick you out. And that's one way that they can make sure that there is no cheating, is what they think that there's cheating. If it smells like a rat, they treat it like a rat and they kick it out. So I think that in the contest world, so many people through the last, since November, these conversations I've had personally and professionally, like so many people have said like, well, but how do you prove it? Well, how do you police it? And the simple answer is that you rule with an iron fist. And when you see things that don't seem to be fair, your rules state that you have the right to do whatever you've deemed appropriate, and you disqualify people, and you make it a chore for people to try to find outs in these contests. And I don't see a problem with that. The simple answer is a friend that I had a conversation with recently, a very known contest player, a champion of such. He said you police it by policing it, which I thought was like brilliantly simple. You police it by policing it.
I got a million reasons, JK, to think that guy's got the right idea. Let me ask you this, because I can be kind of a cynical jerk, okay? So I have an answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it to you objectively before I give you my answer. And I want to specify up top, the person I'm talking about in this next question is not Nissan Gabe, who I believe was a lot of people knocked him for looking for the clarity in the contest last week. And I don't think that was fair for him to be knocked for that. This was a guy who had a major victory questioned, and he wanted to make sure in the event he was alive for $3 million. And in the event that he won, he wanted to make sure he didn't have to go through that nonsense, that he could actually enjoy a victory. I think that's fair. And while I'm sympathetic to the people who said, well, just don't collude at all and it won't be an issue, that's not really right, because then potentially he would be taking a knife to a gunfight if everybody else is allowed to play a certain way that he's not allowed to play. So I do, in his case, I totally understand why he was asking for that clarification. However, and this is the question I want to ask, however, what possible motivation, all the people out there who keeps talking about lawsuits and saying things about, how unpoliceable it is, and the ones who are taking this other side of the argument that would allow cheaters to keep, seriously, whatever they're doing, whatever their logic is, their solution would allow cheaters to keep cheating. So what's their motivation exactly, JK?
Well, I mean, I think that there's problems. Okay, well, first of all,
you know where I'm going with my answer, right?
Right. Well, first of all, maybe I didn't say it clear enough the first time, and I do want an opportunity to say it, especially considering the fact that I was a part of the letter that brought the negative attention to Nissan. I agree, and I have no problem saying it out loud. I agree with Nissan's point that he should have been given an answer. I do think that the question he was asking he was asking if he could collude, and I would prefer he didn't do so. However, I do believe that he deserves and has the right to, if he's participating in a contest, to have those questions answered for him. I do agree with you. With that said, there's two motivations, right, that you're discussing of why someone doesn't, or two reasons why someone doesn't think it's policeable. One, and I don't mean this to be ugly, I just mean it to be truthfully. One is because those people honestly aren't familiar enough with the interworkings of a contest and wagering patterns and wagering intricacies to feel comfortable enough identifying when something is irregular. And so instead of saying, I can't find it because I don't understand it, they just say, how do you police it? They continue to answer a question with a question, which is something I experienced for like 8 years of my life. You know where I'm going on that.
I think there's a few people out there who pick it up when you're laying down.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you don't answer a question with a question. You answer the question, and then you can ask another question. And so I think that's one of the reasons that happens. The other reason is because, like you said, is like they've discovered an edge that would not fit well in a system that is being heavily policed. And so therefore they would prefer that edge not be taken away. God bless them for that, but it's not what's good. It's not what's good for tournaments. It's not what's good for the growth of tournaments, and it's not what's good for the industry.
Very well said. There's a big difference between these two statements. I can't do it, and it can't be done. Two very different statements. And I think there's a lot of people out there saying, I can't do it. They're saying it can't be done, but what they mean is I can't do it. And to the other point, I'll say it like this. Do we really believe that these people are so concerned with the potential political fallout and logistics and trickiness that would come with the judgment calls that would come with this type of policing? Or do we think they have something to hide? I'm going to take what's behind door number 2, every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, well, not everyone, right? I mean, not all. I mean, you know, I try not to generalize too much because I'm sure there's some people that just like genuinely don't see a problem with it. But the idea of just like saying, let's just keep it all above board and say, oh, teams should be allowed. Well, if teams should be allowed, and this is something that I said, that I've said many times, if teams are allowed, then let's just allow, there's no limit on your buy-in for an entry for a contest. So if you know, then just let me buy in with 12 entries.
The Horseplayer World Series, the Horseplayer World Series model.
Right, just let me buy in with 12 entries. And if you're, and then I'll pause and let you answer why you won't let me do that. Like we always do. You can write out if you want to. And then, so I'll pause and then I'll say exactly my point. You don't want me to have 12. Looks bad. It gives me an advantage and it's away from the spirit of the game. However, you want to let it operate in of darkness, and that to me is ridiculous. I just think it's
crazy.
Silly.
Crazy. Well, especially because I'd like to see tournaments involve. Oh boy, the brain out too late at Lucha Vavoom downtown. JK. I'd like to see this evolve to the point where it's more like golf. You know, where the tournaments look. You're never gonna. I've said many times, tournaments aren't the way to show who the best horse player is. That's kind of an absurd notion. But they're really a way to run them in the spirit of a competition that comes a lot closer to that. Something like golf or at the very least poker. And I'd like to see it evolve that way. And I don't think it evolves that way with teams. I mean, I think the whole teams, it's just gross. It's like kind of foul. It just stinks. Like, how are you going to grow something where you're just telling people, hey, come on here, walk into the lion's den, walk into my own personal takeout reduction center, and be exploited? Like, how is that going to work? That wasn't rhetorical. I really want to know how that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it does work. I mean, I just think that, like, I mean, there's so many people. I mean, I would say 50% of the people that are involved in that are handicappers and horse players that do not play in contests. 50% of I'll just say 25% of them just can't be bothered. You know, they'd rather just focus their time on their real churn and handle and as a profession. I would say 25% of them just really probably haven't been introduced to it. 25% think it's full of cheaters. And I don't know about the other 25%. I did bad math. I didn't plan this analogy out well. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think it's like a lot of people, there's a big portion of the people that we could have participating in this area, this actual area of growth and racing. And they don't because of, and I would think also probably I think the other 25% is people that don't participate is because of unclarity of the takeout situation in some of the contests. Like, well, what's really happening here? Where's it actually going? And I think that probably deters people as well. So I think all of those reasons are why people that easily could be involved in this area of growth tend to stay away. I mean, I hear it all the time. You hear it. There's annoying people on Twitter that say it all the time. There's people that say it in real life. I'm not going to play in contests. It's a team situation. Blah, blah, blah. It's teams. I mean, I've been accused of that before. Oh, you're just part of a team, which I have no problem saying, like under oath that I've never been a part of a team. You know, I've always played as an individual, except for that one time I told you that Nick got mad at me when we said we were going to share our winnings, and I bet all that money on the horses never happened again.
Well, honestly, what you did there to me wasn't colluding. That's taking, and that's a whole other conversation. I don't want to make this whole show about just this issue, so we don't have to go too deep into this. But the idea of taking a percentage of another player and yet playing independently, I understand why some would want that out too, because you get into some weird gray areas with that. And to me, that one is much harder to police because it doesn't, you can police what leaves footprints, right? And that doesn't necessarily. But anyway, I don't have a problem with that. And in fact, and this brings up something else, and actually it comes back to Nissan for a minute. because he asked me a very good question that I was going to attempt to address in an article that never was able to get finished for complicated reasons. But he asked me, like, hey, Pete, like, your coverage, you've covered team situations in the past. And by teams, meaning he didn't say teams. He said you've covered partners in the past. And he was referring to an article I wrote about Ed Robinson and Ed Briggs when they teamed up to win the Del Mar tournament, which basically I just wrote to get the line, 2 Eds are better than 1 in the piece. But anyway, and then he didn't point this out, but to make his point for him, I've certainly written about the Don Beardsworth, Dennis DeCauer partnership and how they ran twice in the NHC consecutive years. Maybe I was just naive, but when I started covering tournaments, I talked to a few people in the tournament world, and I was assured that those situations were being audited, where it was more like what you just described that you did with Nick at Santa Anita that time. They have a piece of each other, but they don't play a bunch of the same horses to try to all the things one could do to collude. And if you're curious about that a little bit more, check out the rules that I helped consult on for the World Championship of Handicapping. I laid out some scenarios that I thought were gross and shouldn't be allowed. I thought those were always being looked at. Subsequent events, particularly at the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, made me think that maybe some people weren't being completely honest with me when they talked about how these things were audited. And basically, my attitude, my favorite word, this podcast, my attitude evolved to the point where, now I think it's much more of a problem. Does that all make sense to you?
Did I scare you for a second? Absolutely. No, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, no, it does.
Why are you muting? You're in like a semi-soundproof. Am I so loud that I'm coming through the wall? Is that the problem?
You are pretty loud, Pete. But that's like you said yesterday. We were talking about something. You reminded me that it's in your blood to project your voice.
I've got to
broadcast in a broadcasting way. So, and plus I'm scratching my beard and fidgeting around. I don't want you to yell at me.
Fair enough. But back to the question at hand, if you remember it.
Yeah, I do think that that's a good point. Is like, we talked about it before. I've talked about it, and to anyone that will listen, you taking a percentage of someone's play to me is not a problem of collusion. Like, that's not a problem. The problem is that when you do something that other people can't do, and then coordinate that thing in one game plan. So if I can only have 2 entries, but then you and 2 other guys have 4 entries, and you coordinate those 4 entries under one plan, that is a problem. I don't care if you have 28 entries and you guys sit in a closet in your own individual closet and play on your own and share 10% of each. That's not problematic to me. That's not an issue. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And I agree. I've always had the impression that these events are audited and that situations like this are looked at. And no, it's not easy, but it's not as impossible as some people would like to lead you to think it is.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I've talked to Chris Larmy about this at length. 2 points related to Chris. One thing he says, and this should probably be studied, but I think his general idea is correct, that it should be all about the effect that these linked entries, whether they're linked by a backer, by having a piece of each other, or actively coordinating, what effect they have on the other entry, the random entry, the single entry, the person who just wins in. And, in live bankroll play, I think we all agree that individual's chances go way down. The individual entry chances go way down when those other people are playing together, essentially. I don't think they go down if there's other. It doesn't matter if I have 10% of you and you have 10% of me, as long as the entries aren't being played together. That's the key idea here. And he believes, and I don't think he's exactly wrong about this, but he believes that the NHC format is such. I don't know what he'd say. I would say the NHC format is such that it's less of a problem because of the way that tournament goes. There's so many plays, the cut lines. There's several things about it. And I don't want to name names here. I mean, there are some very naked examples of coordinated play this year out there in the desert. And they got, I joked at the awards banquet that, the NTRA would like to thank Garrett Skiba for not winning. But the fact of the matter is they dodged way bigger bullets than that, in my opinion. And I think hopefully this is the thing that causes them to look at their tournament and do something a little bit different. But I don't have a lot of hope, JK.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm actually hopeful. I mean, I think that some adjustments will be made, and I agree. I mean, look, the mythical win place is not that. It's hard to coordinate an advantage like you can in live money. However, there are ways that you could obtain a significant advantage. Look, I'm not trying to give people the blueprint, but if you have 2 entries and your wife has 2 entries and you play the same plays on all 4 and you make all 4 show up in the semifinal round and then you divert, that's a significant advantage. People will tell me, "Oh, but you're wasting your other 3 if you're not having a good day." Yeah, but that's because that's because you are chasing bombs and taking stabs, and I'm handicapping races and picking winners. So if I played exactly like I played my entry that made it to the semifinals, and I had 4 entries, can you imagine on Sunday when I woke up and I have 40 races to play, 40 horses to play, while everyone else has 10, and you're going to tell me that's not an advantage?
It's ridiculously unfair advantage. And the other point I'll make is, and this, I'm talking to, I feel a little bad. I could have just picked up the phone and told Chris this stuff, but I don't know. It just started flowing today. I didn't plan on talking about this long, but it's not even if I think you're right, JK, but even if you're wrong, this is one of those cases where you got to think about just like what it looks like in terms of growing and marketing it. The answer can't be, it's not that much of an advantage when one of these situations bubbles up into somebody having a 6-figure score or even winning your damn tournament. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've had several people say, and I don't know if this is true because we've seen this in racing before where things seem like the end of the world and they blow over a couple of weeks later. But I mean, multiple people have said to me, if so-and-so had won, that would be the end of this thing. And it's hyperbolic, but it's not totally wrong. And I think that needs to be addressed as well. And that's the last I have to say on it, unless you want to put a punctuation mark on the end of that very long sentence, JK.
No, I mean, I think some people I bet you a couple of our listeners are probably, and I think it's important that we say this, are probably like, geez, these guys are obsessed with this. But I think what you have to understand is what tournaments mean to us on a personal level, right? It's like for Pete, he wrote a book about it, got to meet a lot of people, and he's covered all of these winners of all of these contests for the last, 3, 4, 5 years. So he got a personal interest in it. He wakes up every day and has to think about contests. And so when you wake up every day and have to think about something, you suddenly start to care about the integrity of it and its longevity and so when stuff like this comes up, it gets a little weird. And then for me, like I have no problem admitting that like tournaments are why I even get to do this awesome show with Pete twice a week. So I care. It matters to me. It's been beneficial for me in my life. Contests I love them. It's fun. I have 20 of my best friends in the world I met in contests. So like it matters to me and I don't want it to go away. And I feel passionately, and I think Pete feels the same way, that I just want it to be fair for everyone. So a new guy next year who's like I was 5 years ago can show up and have a chance. I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach to think that as much time as I spent on the first Breeders' Cup betting challenge that I played in, as excited as I was, we rented a house, I brought all my friends, and like to think that maybe I never really had a chance because I had one entry and I was playing against a guy with 4. It kind of sucks, We want to try to get that problem fixed so it doesn't happen moving forward.
The other thing just to piggyback on what you said about me, and I appreciate that sentiment very much. But I've had so many people come up to me and say, like, your coverage helped get me into this. Thank you for showing me this world. It's almost, let's pretend it's not as bad as what some people say in terms of everything is a team and this and that. But, it's not as good as it's a clean game either. But I mean, the idea that I'm like helping some of these people by bringing lambs to the slaughter, like that is something I can't, like that keeps me up at night. The idea that I'd be in, And I think to some degree this has been true up till now with some of the ways that I have maybe not spoken out about some of this stuff sooner. The idea that I'd be helping certain advantage players, by bringing in people to put money in an unfair situation, I can't. Oh man, I just can't. You know what I'm saying?
No, 100%. I mean, it was a conversation we've had before. I think you said the first time you said minnows into a shark tank.
Yeah, same idea. That is not something I can live with. Fortunately, we've got some ideas. Can't quite talk about them yet, but there are some things percolating. So you could, it's not a situation like the weather where we talk about it and don't do anything about it. Okay, we've got an opportunity coming up, and folks can take a look at playing by a different set of rules, or they can choose not to, and either way is good. Wow, we went off on that for a while, but I think there was some good meat on the bone. I think we're ready to turn the conversation forward. Here's a really good question that came in from Kyle Bailey, who I appreciate has asked a lot of good questions along the way. He was talking about a day where he entered tournament picks and he had a strong opinion on a horse who was 6-1 on the morning line. He was going to play some extra tournament entries just because he liked this 6-1 so much. Then he saw the TV's Matt Bernier DRF game plan, and several other public handicappers had the same opinion. And he asked, how much should I have devalued this suddenly wise guy horse when looking at my tournament selections, or should he have devalued it at all? I thought that's a great question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. I mean, it happens all the time when, you fall in love with a horse that's 6-1 on the morning line, and then you start realizing that everyone else loves that horse. And so you didn't see anything special. I mean, I'm talking about myself as well. I'm not just talking about Kyle. You're not seeing anything special, so obviously everyone else is going to see the same thing. And that 6-1 is not going to be 6-1. It's going to be 5-2. And if the morning line was 5-2, would you have the same enthusiasm that you had when it was 6-1? The answer is probably no. You should probably grab the reins and pull back a little bit. However, during the week, on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that, when you're doing the kind of the feeders, there's still a lot of power with knowing you're going to get a 5-2 home. So I wouldn't necessarily back off of that situation. But on a Saturday for a qualifier where there's 180 people in it, or there's 50 people in it, and there's $300 to get in or whatever, I would probably temper my enthusiasm in that situation.
My thought would be I would still play the horse. I think it'd be going too far to get off the horse. But maybe if you had that idea of buying, maybe if you were going to press a little and buy a few extra entries to get closer to the max amount of money you were going to play when you thought the horse was going to be 6-1, maybe don't do that and just rein in the number of tournaments you play. And that would be another way to go about it. But at the same time, you don't want to get off that horse because you just don't know. Sometimes those horses still end up being value. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do that is to look to see who else is in there, right? Like, I mean, if the situation is you love this 6-1 shot, right, and it's trained by Ian Wilkes and Matt Bernier and the DRF Inside Post and Dan Illman picked the horse, right? But then you look in the form, there's two Todds and a Chad. Well, you're probably still going to get your 6-1, and Matt and Dan are just wise guys like you are, I mean, so. Now, if it's a Todd that's 6-1 morning line, who's coming off of a long layoff, and three people pick him, now we're looking at a situation where that horse is going to obviously be bet down.
I think that's well said. Here's another really interesting tournament question from a fellow named Joe, who I don't know. He talks about average winning scores in online tournaments. Now, for a long time, as far back as Noel Michaels' book, and it was the same when I researched my book a few years ago. If you looked at a wide variety of tournaments, the average winning score is about 2.5 times the starting bankroll. So, in other words, if you had 10 races, $2 win place, that's a $40 bankroll. You would expect the winning score on average to be around $100. Does that meet your expectation and understanding, Jonathan?
Yeah. How many races did you say? 12?
I said 10.
10. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. And I know you'll ask me the question, so I'll wait to answer it, but I have a thought about this as well.
So did I send you this one? Because what he says is really interesting. It's just a different way of looking at the world. he said, why do you think there's been no improvement in that ratio? In so many games and so many sports over time, athletes get better records, get broken, et cetera, why in tournaments has that 2.5 number stayed the same over time? And the question kind of blew my mind, because my first gut was, well, it just doesn't work like that. But then I was trying to think why. I think that there's some answer that relates to like economics and markets in here that I'm not sharp enough to understand, I think.
Yeah.
But I thought it was worth just throwing it at you and seeing what you thought of that idea.
Here's what I would do. I love doing this. I love like having like the final statement and then not being able to explain it and then letting someone smarter than me explain it. So if I was sitting with some smart people right now, like a Marshall Graham or a Eric Bialik or Mike Maloney or Sean Borman, I would probably say, or even, I can't leave out Nick Tamaro. I would say, do you think maybe that it's like that because the parimutuel pools are actually becoming more efficient over time? And so that's going to keep that number from climbing because they're not becoming more inefficient. And then I would step back and let the really smart guys explain it, because there's no way in heck I could explain that.
I think you nailed it, actually. No, I think you nailed it, actually, because, right, as the parimutuel market gets smarter and smarter, more efficient, as you said, JK, it just doesn't allow for that kind of growth that Joe was asking about in that question. I think you might be onto something there, but if folks have thoughts on that, I just think it's an interesting idea worthy of further exploration. We've been talking all about tournaments. I'll put in a quick plug. I don't know if you noticed, we've now got on the DRF tournament site feeders and qualifiers for the Keeneland Spring Contest, as well as the Stronach Group Ultimate Betting Challenge. And, of course, still now running qualifiers for next year's World Championship of Handicapping. A couple of special free events this weekend, including one connected. It's a free contest sponsored by Laurel and the Stakes Carnival they're having on Saturday. Folks should definitely, play in that. It's a free roll, and see what else is on there that suits your needs. But either of those going to be on your personal tournament dance card, you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, both of them, man. Those are two of my favorite ones. I love the TSG Ultimate Betting Challenge. I usually play it from Santa Anita. I think you can play it from both. You can play it from Santa Anita and Gulfstream. That one's always fun. Usually a lot of people playing in that one. I believe it's on Big Cap Day. So nice racing.
The Sunday.
Oh, it's the Sunday. You're right. It's Big Cap weekend. Excuse me. So that one will be good. And then I've said a million times before, like I'm never going to miss the spring contest at Keeneland. It's I just love being in Lexington during the spring. It's beautiful there. The racing's exciting there. If you've never been to Keeneland before, it's like up there with me in terms of like you have to be there, as in Saratoga. You got to go as a horse player, as a horse racing fan. And so that's definitely another one. And then another one that I know that I'll be at is we teased is I'll be at Santa Anita for the Preakness tournament that they've had in the past, and some exciting things I think to come to be announced about that contest. But
save the date.
Just wanted to save the date for people on Preakness weekend out at Santa Anita.
Definitely. Excellent ideas. You'll be able to qualify for all of those events on DRF Tournaments, tournaments.drf.com. Check it out. This time of year, we always see an influx of new interest in contest play, which is so exciting. I've had a lot of people reach out, a lot of people very complimentary of the coverage I was lucky to do with Steve Bick. You can check that out if you want, stevebick.com. Again, I would probably just skip to the end, the last couple hours. Probably some of the best stuff we did, but I don't know if you've got like long drives or something. I suppose you can dip back into the archive and check it out. Steve's done a phenomenal job, even since that contest, talking to contest players, Scott Carson, a public handicapper, and others. So there's plenty of opportunities to get more tournament coverage. But that's enough tournament coverage for this show, JK. It's time to talk about some races. Where in the country should we go first?
I don't know. I think because I have it already pulled up. Let's start at Fairgrounds, huh?
That works for me. Risen Star.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I wanted to talk about Rachel Alexandra. I know we discussed what races we might look at. We talked about it last summer with the opportunity to try to beat Songbird, and we wanted to beat her we wanted to beat her at the right time, and I'm a little bit frustrated that Wonder Godot got beat last time because I was just dying to try to beat her after all the attention and how much money she was taking. But I love Monomoy Girl in this spot. The figures she was running as a 2-year-old back at Churchill, the paces she was running in. I think that she's really, really nice, and I think that she's going to be super tough in this spot. And I hope Wonder Godot takes some money because of her name, and not because of Wonder Godot, but the fact that she's accomplished so much so far in her 3-year-old career. I'm looking forward to Monomoy Girl. I'm going to try to single her and a bunch of stuff. I think the pick. They did that to me, of course. The pick 3 is here. There's no pick 4. So anyway, pick 3 is fine. That's all I need.
I like it. Wonder Godot did have that dressed up look. But she'll take money again here. You might be able to eliminate your takeout by taking a strong stand against her if you really don't like her. I feel like I can't talk about this race without I haven't properly handicapped it, but just to say that Heavenly Love, I was so high on her heading into the Silver Bullet Day, and I'd feel bad if she knocked me out, but I think I'd just let her knock me out. I did not see, any real excuse in that last race, and at this point, I need to see something from her, even though I really did love her going into that last spot. What do you think about her? Are you buying, selling, or holding at 6-1 on Heavenly Love?
Yeah, I'm just disappointed in that spot. I liked her that day too, and she just didn't really run, and she didn't really have an excuse. I mean, I guess maybe they didn't have her cranked and ready to rock and roll, but I think this is one of those spots she's gonna have to prove it to me. I mean, maybe in a contest situation or something like that, if Monomoy Girl gets bet down too much, and obviously Wonder Godot takes some money, and Heavenly Love drifts up to 10-1 or 12-1 or something like that. I guess there's a world in which you could get involved, but there's nothing that really is screaming out to me in that spot.
Be an optimist, JK. You're so far ahead that you basically have the protection of the shorties. Maybe that's the scenario where you'd reach. And right, I totally get that. If you're in a situation where you just need a horse who's a price, and sometimes in that case I'll turn. If I don't have any real opinion, I will turn to an old friend. Is that sort of what you're driving at?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, it's a pick 3.
I'm ready.
Do you have anything? I didn't look at the 8th, but I'm just curious if you did before we move on to Person Star. What do you got there?
Well, so here's a situation where, there's not a ton of speed in here, but where the speed or where the possible speed is drawn, I feel great that the pace will be honest, right? Thatcher Street doesn't run that fast, but has early pace, drawn inside. They should come out of their forward, take advantage of the slow pace. Zulu Alpha, the 2-horse, has some speed, is down kind of inside of a big full field, should move forward. And then if you go to the outside, the 11 and the 12 have some early speed. The 11 is stretching out from 5.5, and the 12 back at Gulfstream went an honest pace and is drawn outside. So those 2 horses have to be forward. And it sets up perfectly for my horse, the 3, Galton, for Mike Maker, who's been closing in his slow paces the last 2 times. One of my favorite turf angles available. And so that's a horse that I would love to try to build a lot around. These crazy turf races, I try to avoid them, but the 3 Galton would be my pick in tournaments, and also kind of a double A for me in multi-race bets.
All right, let's move on to the Risen Star. Interesting collection of horses. I got to write the so-called super look for DRF. I spilled like 2,000 words on this race, JK. So I'm very curious to see if you think I'm crazy. For me, in vertical terms, I just thought Instilled Regard looked really, really tough and was going to take absolutely all the beating. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm between 2 horses. One is a little bit shorter. The other one's a little longer. I think Principe Guillerme had an excuse last time. Obviously, it was super wide both turns, and finished well enough in that spot. First time against graded stakes companies out for that allowance win. I think that horse could improve for Steve Asmussen, especially the way that Asmussen trains his horses. I think that horse could improve. But I'm really interested in Bravazzo with Calumet Farm and Dwayne Lucas. That horse ran big in that race at Oaklawn with a nice figure. And one of the things I like to do, we talk about all the time, is I go into time form. I look at the chart from the previous race and look to see what all the other horses have run after that. And so especially when there's a big figure, so the horse runs a big figure, and I don't remember the number. I looked at it on the plane, but I think it's 3 or 4 horses have run back from that race. And of those 3 or 4 races, they have improved their time form US figure on average 10 points each. So some a little bit more, some a little bit less, but on average 10 points each. So if you give that same 10-point allowance to this horse, he's super live in here. And it's one of the angles I like to look at. He's second off of a layoff. And obviously the coach knows how to get a horse going on the Derby prep. And so Bravazzo, the 7 for me, is kind of my price play. But I think Principe Guillerme can turn the tables.
What don't you like about Instilled Regard? He just pasted your horse by 4 lengths.
Well, it was 3 and change, but who's counting beans?
What's a quarter of a length among friends?
Yeah, and he was wide in there too, right? Nothing's really. I don't
think ground loss terribly mattered that day. I took a quick look through to see, and it looked to me like the paths were fairly even. Just one of those days. It's not really a bias, but just we talk about it in the Maloney book and call it an 0-1 track. It's sort of like a different kind of a neutral track. That's just a thought anyway. But yeah.
It's not a dislike. It's just he won the last prep. He's going to be bet off the board. I think people think
he'll be odds on.
They have yes, I do think so. I was going to say people think that I like chalk, but it's actually true. I really do like chalk. But there's certain situations in which it doesn't make sense to me when there's a lot of up and coming horses. We talked about it last week about being able to find that improver, especially in these 3-year-old situations. And from a figure standpoint, Bravazzo kind of fits with those 2 horses. And so that's why off of that last performance, I'm going to give Bravazzo a chance of what's going to be 10-1. 10-1s win these darn Derby preps all the time. And I'm usually sitting there holding a losing ticket on a 8-5 horse that looks just like Instilled Regard.
Yeah, that's funny. I don't disagree. I would not try to talk you off. I didn't say anything particularly nice about Bravazzo in the write-up, but I wouldn't talk you off that one. I was just thinking that Principe Guillerme, that was the one I was thinking has no reason to beat Instilled Regard, but we'll see. That'll be interesting. To underline your point, I went into the Formulator charts feature. For folks who don't know about this, it's phenomenal. The Formulator charts figures, you can go to a buyer figures view, and you can see it doesn't seem like it's quite as dramatic as it is in time form, but it's still clearly there. You've got 4 horses who came out of that last race of Bravazzo's. They've all improved their figures. Dream Baby Dream by 10, Kingsville by 5, Soup Pisse by 8, and even the last place finisher in there had a 2-point improve in the next race. So I think that's an interesting idea that people always talk about key races, meaning more than one horse came back to win. But that's fine. But for me, I'm more interested in maybe trying to find a key race the way that you suggest, JK, by looking at the figures, the horses who come out and what they do the next time. And I think that can point you to just races that were live and full of improving horses, and or sometimes in rare instances where figure makers sometimes will make a logical call that a figure shouldn't be particularly high, that no, based on what these horses have run before, this figure is more in line. But sometimes they come out being a little low on that when they do that, and the figures actually should be higher. Which element of that is more important to you? The idea that it's a field of improving horses, or the idea that the figure might be a little bit off?
To me, it's a figure off thing, right? Like it's like the figure's a little bit off. If all the horses come back and run higher numbers, then it suggests that number that was given could be a little bit lower than it needed to be. And it also suggests that if all 4 have come back and run higher numbers, that you can expect that this horse is going to come back and run a higher number. And then if he runs a higher number, where does that put him in this field? I think it puts him right there. I mean, so that's that. I'm not so concerned when it comes to key races with winners, right? Because, how can you say that a race isn't key if 3 horses from that race come back in a stake and get blitzed by a horse like Rachel Alexandra? Just because they didn't win, it doesn't mean that they didn't run well, or it doesn't say anything about the quality that the race was before that. I get it as a guide, and I respect, I believe Steve Davidowitz was one of the first people that mentioned the key race. I respect it as as a concept. I just look at it in a different way. I want to know more or less, are horses running better numbers out of that race, and are they showing up and running good, rather than if they're winning or losing.
One other horse I'll mention as sort of a bottom-up try and super type horse. I was a little bit interested in High North for Brad Cox down at the rail. I thought that last race was kind of sneaky good. There's been some time off for some potential improvement. The horse has shown he can finish his races. Just one to throw in there, maybe underneath at a big price before we move on. Anything else on the Risen Star, JK?
No, I think we should probably hop out to Maryland, you think?
Yeah, definitely. Laurel, it's a cool looking card. I've only looked at the 2 graded stakes. So if you have anything else elsewhere on the card, feel free to throw that in, or we can just jump right to the graded ones. And I definitely, people who don't take a look at Laurel very often should put it on their radar for Saturday. It's definitely some really good winter stuff happening there.
Laurel was great to me out in Vegas, so I'm very, very fond of Laurel America, the racetrack that Jack Jenkins built. I like the 2 outside horses here. Historically, we talked about the show before. The inside's not where you want to really be at Laurel, and so the 9 great stuff coming out of the toboggan, and then the 10 Do Share, who's coming out of another stakes race, I think at the Gravesend at Aqueduct 2, are both drawn outside. Both are tactical enough. Both fit on class and on figures. And I think both of those horses should be tough from the outside, depending on who does what. Dylan Davis and Manny Franco show up. Dylan Davis has been riding lights out. I've expressed my jockey crush on Manny Franco and how I loved seeing him finish on a horse. He tries so hard, and so I love having a rider that lays it out there every time. So I don't know which one. And out of the gate, I actually played a double here using just these 2 horses. And my angle and equity builder here is the fact that Awesome Banner's down on the inside, had a nice figure last time, a win over the track, and should take some money. And with him taking, with him taking money, that should help add a little equity to the ticket using the 2 outside horses.
I get where you're going with this. I just can't get excited about either one because I feel like they were both, their closing runs feel to me like they were both flattered last time, but I couldn't really come up with an angle beyond. I couldn't come up with anything that I felt excited about risking my money on elsewhere. So, I'm tempted to try to come up with some sort of wager, but I can't do it. I think that, you probably have it over a barrel. One thought is there may be a pace angle since both of their running styles are similar. Who's going to be the best of speed in here, do you think?
See, the problem I usually have with identifying the best of speed at Laurel is the fear that the best of speed is going to end up on the rail.
Yep.
And I think that the horse that feels like he's probably the fastest would be probably the one Cowboy MZ or Cowboy Miz or whatever. But I think that horse is probably the most likely. But the thing is, so then if you design the race from there, okay, the 1 doesn't go, he takes back. Well, the 1's still eliminated because he'd be buried down inside. Then the 2 catches the rail. Then I'm done with that. If the 2 takes back, then he could obviously sit in the 2 path outside the 1, or he's going to take back far enough to end up on the rail anyways. Then the 4 gets to the rail. All paths lead to the 9 and the 10 winning. And that's
You're right. No, I mean, it's funny. Sometimes you have to let go. When you come into a race and you have an idea that you want to execute, if it's not there, it's not there. So for me, that one would probably be either just a token play using chalk, or maybe I just wait and save bullets for the next race. The 10th, which is the Barbara Fritchie. Is that what it is?
It is. It is the Barbara Fritchie.
Excellent. I did that thing where I asked a question I didn't know the answer to again. I like the horse in here, but it's a rail problem again potentially with Divine Miss Gray. But I'm thinking, I don't know, Carmouche, can he be trusted to potentially get this horse off the rail?
You know what I'll say about Carmouche is that he is a guy that's always very aware of bias. You notice it at Aqueduct all the time. If the rail's not good, he'll get off of it. If the rail's good, he'll get to it. He's one of those guys that's aware of it. And ironically enough, there's a lot of guys that aren't aware of it. And it happens to be their job. But he's also a guy that's going to send away from there. So if he sends and he's aware, then he'll get off, but he might not. And or if someone comes outside of him, then he won't be able to. My play in this situation is to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of scenarios in which Divine Miss Gray ends up inside. And I'm going to stick with the two outside horses. And when I say two outside horses, I saw a note on Twitter that Highway Star, the 11, will scratch, which is one that I was going to use. So now
there's a bunch of cross-entered horses, I think, right?
I think so, yeah. I'm just going to use the 9, 10 here. Miss Locust Point and Kazan. Kazan has been dealing with some bias issues in her career, running into some bad situations. I think she's really a nice horse.
She's great.
Runs well against some quality types. Ran third to By the Moon. Run third to Highway Star. Was beat by Absolutely last time, but then I think has beat her twice in a row since then, or maybe just once since then. But either way, drawn outside, and I'm fine with that situation. And Miss Locust Point with service, you can't really argue there. Drawn outside as well, has some tactical speed. In fact,
probably should clear, right?
Well, I don't want her to clear, because if she clears, if she gets over, I'd like for Divine Miss Gray to go on with it, and then Miss Locust Point to set in the 2 or 3 path off of her and get the perfect trip that you want down at Laurel.
I'm hoping that Kendrick is able to maneuver into such a position where he can flop outside of the 9 and run his race from there. But I would also use Kazan, just a horse that the filly I've always liked, mare, I guess. I've always liked, and you mentioned about some bias issues. There have also been some trips in the mix, and she's just got a toughness that I think we all love to see in horses we risk our money on. So I'll try those two. Hope that Ms. Locust Point doesn't have the finish, and we'll try to take it. We'll try to take it from there. What else did you look at around the country?
Well, I think we should probably show a little love to the place we're going to spend a few hours today. I believe they have a stake on Saturday, the Buena Vista. I think that's what it is.
Have a look. It should. I'm always happy to talk about Santa Anita. Very excited to be there for the first time. You mentioned this year's Preakness contest, JK, where we're having people save their dates and potentially make their way out to Santa Anita. I haven't been there since last year's Preakness contest, so it's always nice to take in the mountain view and see our friends Nate and TQ and Arcadia and the rest of the crew. Hopefully Leo. I'm hoping, though I'm worried after it being in Las Vegas last week, if Leo's going to be able to get the day off work to come out there. There was a rumor Frank Scottoni might even be in the house today. It should be a lot of fun. If you happen to be listening live and you're going to be at Santa Anita, reach out at us. So what is the big race tomorrow?
Yeah, well, it's the Buena Vista. And just for the record, the man in black will also be there.
Oh,
and his son in black will also be there. So it's going to be fun.
Son in black, very nice. I like that.
He doesn't wear black though. He dresses like a normal person.
So maybe it should be son of black then.
Yeah, son of black. Yeah, the POTUS capper will like that one.
No comment.
So in this race, I noticed that Sassy Little Lila, who was an East Coast type that kept showing up, that I'm sure a lot of you burned money on, thinking she was going to be loose all the time, and a lot of times she'd be too loose and go too slow. I love to see that Flavian Pratt gets up. She's been switched to Richard Mandela's barn. There's nothing wrong with that for obvious reasons. The horse is worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times for Mandela, so should be ready to roll off the break. The last work was 3 furlongs. I love that. This is something I never read. I just picked it up one day. When the last work, when a horse is coming off a layoff, is only 3 furlongs. In my opinion, it screams that the trainer feels absolutely confident with the horse's fitness. Because if they didn't, they would work them, a half or 3/4 or whatever to try to get that last little piece of fitness in them. But the fact that they only work them 3 furlongs to me suggests a horse is ready to rock and roll. So I expect this horse to do well. I expect this horse to be forwardly placed in this situation. And, I think a lot of people will look for price to perfection for some value, but I don't see that. A horse that is royally bred and then comes from Chad Brown and Graham Motion, and they couldn't get her right. No offense to Jim Cassidy. I think he's a great trainer, but it just feels like this horse is probably not trainable.
That seems like a reasonable way of looking at the world. I was hoping to get out there tomorrow. Not going to be able to do it, unfortunately, but I'll be watching on the phone from either a backyard barbecue or the Chinese New Year parade downtown, both of which are on the dance card. Should be fun. Great to get a chance to get out here to LA and made so many friends over the years out here. Now there's always 17 things to do. But this is the man, just so I don't lose my degenerate credibility, JK. I did at one point, I think, have 10 straight trips to Los Angeles where I didn't leave Arcadia, Pasadena area. So I don't want people to think I have like a normal, well-balanced life or anything. We don't want to give that impression.
It's remarkable. It's impressive.
Few minutes left. This was a little story I wanted to tell from friend of the podcast, Drew, another one who's asked so many excellent questions in the past. I just thought this was kind of cool. He chimed into me that he heard the BIC coverage of the tournament last weekend, and it gave him the itch to get involved in tourneys a little bit. Is off to a pretty good start. Wasn't able to win the other day, the bigger tournament he played, but was able to get some breakage in another tournament and also to win a head-to-head. And he said this about tournaments. I thought it's a sentiment you'd appreciate. He says that tournaments have helped him reground himself on what value is. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, no, I've said it a lot of times in doing conversations about contests and what drew me to them and what they mean to me and how they've helped me as a handicapper. I did not have the confidence to play 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to 1 shots before I started playing contests. I just didn't. It was always I was hoping. And then when I was playing contests, because of the importance of value, I was forced to play horses like that. And then I discovered that I actually do have the ability to sometimes smoke out horses like that are 7 to 1, 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1. So I completely agree with that sentiment and would encourage people to go, if that's something that you feel like you struggle with. It's a great way, I think, to work on that because it forces you to develop some confidence and your ability to identify longer priced horses.
I've called it developing a muscle memory for making those kind of plays. You know, when you don't, until you start to do it, and then it just becomes more intuitive. I think that's where Drew's going with that statement. We'll follow him. His goal is to qualify on DRF tournaments for the Grade 1 Gamble, which is pretty cool. Hopefully, we'll wish Drew success in that endeavor. And here's a related question, actually, about breakage. Somebody asks if it's a 1 in 10 tournament and there are 34 entries, 3 prizes are given away. What happens with the money from the other 4 entries? I'll let you explain it.
It goes to like second, third, fourth, and fifth, right?
Well,
get their money back essentially.
In the example I gave, it would be 4th, 5th, and 6th. Basically, that money gets returned to the next finishers out of the prize pool in the form on DRFT. It would be in the form of site credit. So that's what Drew was talking about. He basically, right. I mean, sometimes it's going to be your money back. Sometimes it's going to be a bunch more than getting your money back, depending on what the prize is that one is playing for. If you're looking at, the $5,000 prize like the World Championship of Handicapping buy-in, it could be 800 or 1,000 or 1,200, and it's usually scaled. Best way to do this is to just go to the DRF Tournament's website. After a tournament begins, you probably have to give Michael Zapin and the team a few minutes to get everything updated. But if you go into an updated description after a tournament runs, they'll tell you exactly what you're playing for. So it's not any sort of guessing game. And you've said, JK, that there have been times in your tournament life where you've been in a position where you shot for breakage at the end of a tournament. Talk about that for a sec.
Yeah, no, I've laid up before. I mean, if I have if you're playing an all Aqueduct or all Santa Anita or whatever, and in the last race you have a trip horse coming off of a B+ workout on a class drop, and the horse is 6 to 5, and the 6 to 5 gets you your money back, but you got to hit an 8 to 1 to get to the prize. I'll take the 6 to 5, get my money back, and live the fight another day.
More angles than an octagon, that kind of horse. It's just things coming from every side. You don't want to miss out on that horse if you have a chance to get rewarded. It's just another way that tournaments can add value in situations because you can add whatever you have to risk on the horse. You're adding that much more Makes sense to me. All right, JK, we're just about out of time. I don't know about you, but I think I might go in this pool here at the Langham. What do you think?
No, the only pool I'm going to is the infield at Santa Anita, and they don't even have one.
I thought you were talking. You thought you were going to make the bad pun about the Pari-Mutual pool. So I thank you for not doing that anyway.
You set me up. You did set me up. That's good. I'll be. Yeah, we'll have Craig edit. Yeah, Pete, I can't wait to get in that early players pick 5 pool.
Oh, tremendous! When we get the podcast like totally sponsored, I should mention that like we're getting zero free from the Langham for the plug either. We're getting nothing from Santa either. But we'll get the show sponsored within an inch of its life in about 5 years when we're all rich and famous, and we'll do. You'll hear that all the time. But like when you're listening to the ball game, it gets a bit much. All right, we're out of time. Craig tells me he is not going to edit the open of the show, so that's at least now we have, mark it down for the best of Craig. We can talk about how things don't always go so smoothly on the show, but hopefully the rest of the day will go perfectly smoothly for you and for us. I want to thank Jonathan Kitchen. I want to thank Willie Nile, who sings our theme song. For more of his music, check out willienile.com. Travis Stone, voice of the Kentucky Derby. Always great to hear that little intro, and we thank Travis for his time in putting that together. Producer Craig, most of all, want to thank all of you for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. May you win all your photos.